I'm Tina Fordham, and you're watching The Navigator, our digital playbook highlighting the geopolitical risks that matter most for markets and the business environment. Well, this week we heard a lot about the risk of World War III. It was one of the top most searched for terms. This came after the attack by an Iran-backed militia group that killed 3 U.S. servicemen. These were the first combat deaths of U.S. soldiers in the Middle East in years, and that's a big deal from a geopolitical risk perspective, because anything involving the U.S. and Iran, potentially in direct confrontation, is a nightmare geopolitical risk scenario. Even though President Biden has promised to retaliate, commodities markets barely blinked. Oil prices went up around $1 a barrel before settling right back down again. So what's going on here? I think markets are betting that Washington won't risk widening the conflict in an election year for fear of driving up gas prices. But I think this expectation is also misplaced. Although Washington has been clear that it does not want a full-scale war with Iran, from a military strategy perspective, the U.S. has to retaliate or else expect an increase in attacks on U.S. military assets and soldiers. And that's not anything a U.S. president wants to see in an election year or ever. So the most likely result, in my view, is that the U.S. will make so-called precision attacks on sites linked to Iranian proxies in neighboring countries, but avoid attacks inside Iran proper. So when it comes to stress testing the risks, we need to think about how much restraint we think Washington and Tehran will show, how much control Iran really has over its proxies, like the Houthi rebels who've been attacking ships in the Red Sea, and whether all of this bothers China enough to ask Iran to turn down the risk temperature. That's a lot of moving pieces. Let's move on to the next big theme at the moment, U.S. elections. These days, as soon as I meet with clients, the question asked within the first minute is, so who's going to win? You will have noticed that no one is handicapping the U.S. elections yet. They are still 9 months away, and there is far more variability in possible outcomes than usual. So I'm going to tell you my PQ tips, that's political quotient, to help structure your thinking. Point 1, beware of the double hater effect. 62% of American voters say they don't want either Biden or Trump, and that's a lot of people. But we don't yet know how this double hater effect will impact the behavior of independent voters who've been growing in number over the years, or voter turnout. Do people just stay home if they don't like the candidates? Point 2, instead of the usual 2-horse race, 2024 could see a 4 or even 5-horse race. That's because third-party candidates like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Dr. Jill Stein, and others will add even more uncertainty, even though they're not likely to win. These factors are going to make pollsters' lives even more difficult because they have to try to weight these variables without having past data to guide them. And even in more normal times, remember there is a 3 to 5 percentage point margin of error in polls. That's problematic in close elections. And of course, this is even before we start to think about the possible Taylor Swift effect. I'm not kidding. Well, let's turn now to our Navigator watch list for February. I want to flag the 2nd anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th. Putin has form in observing these anniversaries, and he's almost certainly going to say it with missiles and not with flowers. But escalation is not a one-way street. I also want to highlight the possibility that Ukraine's tactics get more below radar and possibly deeper inside Russia. This month, we're also watching the Supreme Court decision on Trump's eligibility to remain on the ballot. Here, I think we should expect a punt from the Supreme Court on the basis probably of a technicality. That's just going to postpone this issue until later, possibly after the elections, potentially complicating declaring a winner. Let's wrap up with 3 silver linings, which I define as developments that are broadly positive for global stability. On European populism, after mass protests across Germany this month, the Alternative for Deutschland suffered a major defeat in regional elections, highlighting that although anti-green and anti-immigrant parties are forces to contend with, they are not unstoppable. On international security, Turkey finally approved Sweden's entry into NATO after months of delay. Sweden joins Finland as 2 new NATO member states. On military aid to Ukraine, the European Union came together this week to approve a €50 billion aid package for Ukraine, overcoming the objections of Hungarian President Viktor Orban. Now let's see if the US Congress will follow suit. Well, that's it from me for today. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to sign up to our Navigator Pulse newsletter on LinkedIn and watch the Nano Navigator for updates on all these developments. Goodbye for now from London.